Hello everyone, how are you doing? Welcome to yet another stream. Hope you're doing well. My filters still active on this? They are. Good. I've had some audio issues recently. Don't know why. Don't know what's going on, but things reset, and it was a pain. So if things sound weird, I apologize. I'll mess with them when needed. Let's see what I missed in the chats. Over on Twitch, Terradona with 100 bit says, "Here's my preemptive, you know nothing, John Doyle." Magpie, thanks for 9 months. This sub baby's name is going to be, Disappointing Failson. Hello everyone on YouTube. Could you give the stream a like? I'd appreciate it. Alright. Cool. So let's jump into it. We'll give people a little bit more time to get here. We'll watch some shorter chud stuff before we get into John Doyle. However, John will be the bulk of the stream, so.
Said before, I get information all the time from Don Jr., and they do know that Trump has heard some of the things I've said before because God said it. It wasn't me, it was God saying it too.
Kat Kerr, QAnon prophet, apparently claims she's in contact with Donald Trump Jr. I don't think this is true. I think this is cuckoo bananas talk in her head, which is unfortunate. Fennikagami says, "The return of Jonathan Trump Doyle. He changed his middle name to reflect his current identity. Am I joking? Who knows?" Remember the guy who was all mad about Starbucks cups years ago, Joshua Fierstein, who was like, "They aren't putting Jesus on the Starbucks cups, and that means we need to be going into the Starbucks and harassing the minimum wage employees." Anyway, apparently he's going to be running for some kind of governmental seat. So that's fun.
But this is great. I'm going to say this. Now, of course, everyone's going to freak out. I may have people unendorse me after this, but this is great. I'm going to say this. CPS, you come to my home, you will be met with the Second Amendment.
If CPS comes to his home, he says they're going to be met with the Second Amendment. I don't think you should preemptively be threatening government agencies because you're a bad parent. Jesus Christ. His voting base is the abusive parent voting bloc. Lines up with Republicans, so it makes sense. My throat's a little iffy. I went to a thrift store today and got a coronet for $25, and I played it today. I haven't played since like high school, and I think I hurt my throat a little bit when I did a little too hard for not being in practice. So I'm sorry if I'm a little coughy today, if I'm coughing or something. I wore out my throat a little with the, you know. Oh, this is so unfortunate.
I feel like to young women, unironically, they need to find a man that's very misogynistic. If you at all want to have a guy that's going to, like, make you follow his frame, and you need to find a strong Christian man that's going to put you in your place, or else you're going to dominate the relationship. And when a woman dominates the relationship, it's destined for failure, because I see even how I was different, like in my previous relationship. I was dominating, and I was such a bitch, like such a Jezebel. And, you know, I wasn't always like a good wife,
This woman needs a cult deprogrammer.
or like this great, like or even Christian. I used to be atheist, but he has completely transformed who I am and how I act because he's such a strong Christian man, and he doesn't let me get by on things. He always will nitpick everything because he's literally training me how to be a good Christian wife. You need to be trained. Women are bitches and they need to be trained. So that's...
Is she aware that you can have, like, a dom-sub relationship that isn't actual abuse? Because it kind of feels like if you're into that, you could do it in a way that doesn't actually take away your human bodily autonomy. That'd be cool.
That's my advice. Find a man that will train you.
Jesus Christ.
I actually think Republicans should embrace...
Wait, do I have we should get Boxy running, huh? Let's get Boxy going. Boxy's he, him today. Today Boxy is mask.
embrace this. You know, I'm so sick of Republicans trying to shimmy away and shy away from the whole narrative that we're white Christian nationalists. No, that's what the Republican Party should be. We should try to go back to our traditional roots. America is a white Christian nation, and it's okay that we want to maintain that nation. We want to maintain what the country was founded on. Let's embrace this. Let's stop letting the left attack us. Embrace the attacks. They always
Fuck you? Fuck you. Is this the strategy now? I say now. I know. Hold on. I gotta fix that light. Sorry, my studio light's getting finicky. Sorry for the missed bits. I'll get them in a second. Benikagami says there really is such a market for women to validate Chud's opinions by repeating their opinions back at them. Yeah, it's unfortunate. If you can find a man to train you, find one that can run a train on you. It's a great secondary option. Funny atheist brony. Jesus. Why would CPS be coming for your home, Joshua? Just curious. Sorry, I'm having a day, chat. I'm having a day. Good day to pick John Doyle. I'll be disappointed. Even more so. Should we just get into John? Let's just get into the John Doyle stuff. This one is about, I guess, Republicans or right-wing people like himself and culture and why they're not good at creating things. So let's check it out. Lance is trying to love herself, says, greetings from your southern neighbors, currently 20 inches of lake effect snow in Michigan City, Indiana. I'm west of there, so I'm not dealing with it, but a reminder that climate is fine and is not a problem. Anyway, John Doyle. Let's do it.
At the end of 2023, the scoreboard was basically that the left took Donald Trump off the ballot in Colorado, and we took Dylan Mulvaney off a beer can.
The left did... John, Donald Trump was sued by Republicans to get him off the ballot. Republicans took him off. But okay. Finikagami says if it makes everyone feel better, things are not looking good for the Republicans. Great. You know, as long as we're all equally fucked. We'll all go together when we go.
Can. Now, obviously, the ballot thing being permanent was a long shot, but it does illustrate what each side likes to direct their efforts towards, what they consider to be a victory, something worth celebrating. And I've heard a lot of sentiment in the last couple of years. It's like we need to stop focusing on political battles. The culture is what's important. We must fight the culture war. All focus now has to be on the culture. And it's like, okay, well, what does that even mean? What does the culture mean to you? And as we find out from listening to these people and seeing what they believe culture is, the right has no idea what culture is, let alone how to make it for themselves, and much less how to...
As far as the right is concerned, culture is when Top Gun. Culture is when Top Gun and Rambo. That's culture. Hulk Hogan, culture. WWE, culture. These are culture and everything else is not culture. Fact.
To actually take the culture back from the left. It's one of those things where I don't even know what these...
GamerG, thanks for 9 months, says I would have gotten away with that ballot too if it wasn't for these pesky leftists, the Colorado Republicans. Thank you, and thanks for kicking off a hype train. That sub-baby's name is going to be Burt Bacharach. Magpie says, sorry to hear about South Carolina no longer allowing gender-affirming care. I didn't even hear about that one. Jesus Christ.
People mean when they are saying these words to me, but culture is not just something that you can force or commission. That's why when the right says, well, the right needs to be making culture. Okay, yeah, go on. Go make some culture. I dare you. Go off, make culture. It's not that simple. And the reason it's not that simple is because culture is simply what people do naturally. And that's why the culture war actually is so important. Ultimately, it's because it's a war for the soul of the nation, because culture is downstream from the soul of the people making it. It's a reflection of their...
Oh god, is John gonna finally realize that he needs to actually have opinions other people agree with if he wants other people to agree with him? Is this gonna be a breakthrough? God damn it, that light keeps going off. I just need a stick. Here. Let's hit it. Work. Damn it. That's right. It worked. I Fonzied. WWE lets women have good matches now so they don't qualify as culture anymore. Is Vince McMahon involved? Siberian Winter says, it's funny you say Republican culture is 80s action because no one can watch Commando zooming in on Arnold's bicep and bulge and tell me it's straight.
Spirit. It's defined and demonstrated by what people do, and conservatives don't do anything. We also have no understanding of what it means to be right-wing, which is why our attempts to make right-wing culture tend to fall flat, and it's because our lack of knowledge of ourselves and our world and our connection to our world leads us to sort of caricaturize ourselves and pretend that if we just do something over the top to own the libs, we're triggering the libs, this is somehow culture. And, you know, I've often said that if we put up a mural of a mother cradling a child, that would be more right-wing than putting a mural of, like, Ronald Reagan riding a velociraptor shooting an Uzi. Like, if you hired a right-wing artist...
Are velociraptors right-wing? In the sense that they have very little concern for the well-being of others. Sure. Can't really think of other connections.
To paint a mural on the side of a building in Portland, Oregon, and they painted something like that, or George Washington flexing his biceps on a pile of dead British soldiers, something like that. It would take far longer for that mural to be defaced than it would if the mural were just a mother cradling her child. And we might be confused about that, but the left certainly is not. And it's because they actually have a better understanding of what it means to be right-wing than we do. Like, they might...
Is this the part where he's going to straw man and act as though that people on the left hate the very concept of innocence and motherhood and babies and apple pie? We just hate it. We just want to blow them up with gay orgy bombs. Like, what the fuck is this? A mural of a mother and a child would get defaced? Why?
Might hate it. They might hate things that are good and natural and true, but they understand that they're right-wing, whereas we think being right
Overthought, thanks for gifting 5 tier 1 subs.
wing is just like owning the libs, being smug. That's why the culture that we make is just the left, but based. It's like we don't know ourselves, we don't know what our culture is, what we are. So because of that, we can only respond to the left. It's not a real right wing, it's simply this like counter leftism, which is why all of our culture is things like beer, but based, coffee, but veteran owned and based and made by not a bisexual Antifa member. And it's like, well, maybe I like that. Maybe that's why I pay the $7. Whatever. So to actually win,
that was almost a funny joke. It's getting better. Good job, John. Steve with a Q says, Velociraptors are right-wing in the sense that they're relics of a long past who keep being revived by old men with more money than sense. Spared no expense.
to actually take the culture back, we're going to need to do a lot more than what we have been doing. We're going to have to be serious about it. We're going to have to develop a proper relationship with the ideas that have been fetishized throughout our culture by the modern world. Revolution, democracy, equality, scientism, these are not our friends. These are not...
Scientism? John, do you think that maybe your glorious empire of whatever you think is cool and awesome probably won't last very long if you have an adversarial relationship with science and reality? Like, again, this is one of the things that frustrates me about, like, authoritarianism or fascism or things like this in general. It's not even just the fact that it's, like, evil. Obviously, there's the whole moral, like, oh, this is terrible and all, you have no concern for human life, and, like, that's obviously the main thing that you should care about, but they don't. So pushing past that, it's completely untenable. You cannot run a civilization where you're like, I don't know about those pesky facts. Like, that's not how this works. Your society will collapse. It won't work.
Our ideas. We need to rediscover and cultivate a proper relationship with natural law, hierarchy, spiritual...
Natural law? Define natural law, John. It was just a picture of the scales of justice, which is kind of like a vague idea that doesn't convey anything.
The equality, scientism, these are not our friends. These are not our ideas. We need to rediscover and cultivate a proper relationship with natural law.
It's the implication that there is some sort of default law that's true that doesn't require any thought or, like, interpretation. Horrifying. Horrifying. Anyone who thinks that they have the objective version of the law that's true and never needs changing and is always true and is like gravity that you can like just discover it, like it's a force of nature, never let that person have power. That's so scary.
Hierarchy, spiritual.
I do find it funny that it was the Bass Pro Shop. Points for that. Stromboli says, family is away for the week and I get to listen to Hannah on the big TV for once. I demand, gigantus Hannah voice for the rest of the stream. I am Big Hannah and I am on a big TV. Please don't pay attention to my pores. Gamer G with a clip. It's the gay bombs. People on the left hate the very concept of innocence and motherhood and babies and apple pie. We just hate it. We just want to blow them up with gay orgy bombs. Plural.
Sexuality, liberty, all of these things properly understood.
Liberty. Liberty in the sense that you do everything that John Doyle says and thinks is okay, and everything he doesn't like and makes him uncomfortable is evil, and you don't have the right to do that. That's liberty. Fenekagami says he's starting to get it, but John, what you're missing is that the real reason you can't do culture, especially now, is because the right hates everything and only defines itself by what you hate. You can only define yourselves by what you aren't. It's why you constantly shift and flip-flop. I think that's literally what he's saying.
Would do far more to advance our culture and our cause than whatever else we're talking about right now. And honestly, if it weren't for the woke stuff, I wouldn't actually know how to define or explain what we're doing. If I were just a normal person and it weren't for the Dylan Mulvaney stuff, like I wouldn't even understand.
It was one ad on like TikTok or Instagram, and even John is still talking about it. He's talking in opposition to that, but he's still talking about it. Jesus. 30 seconds left on the hype train.
Understand what the right is claiming to be about, what it's supposed to look like for the right to declare victory, or even just a victory. Is it all just a grift? What do we actually want our culture to look like? How do we actually get there? I'm so glad that you asked, because funny enough, we're actually going to go over what culture actually is, why it's so important, why conservatives can't seem to make it, some problems with the idea of making our own culture, some truths about why our culture has become the way that it is, how we can actually start to take it back, why most of our perceived victories in doing so, particularly with boycotting, things like that, they're exaggerated. They're not really victories. Typically, they're just trying to fleece money from you, and how these things affected what we saw in 2023 and what that all means going forward. Do stay tuned.
Still doing this intro. Jesus Christ, John.
Well, in.
Heck off.
Heck off, commie.
Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Heck Off Commie. Here we are, just like I said, back precisely when I intended to be. I hope you all had a wonderful Christmas and a wonderful New Year's celebration. So we're going to go through the big culture war victories from last year in just a second. But I want to get this out of the way first. Don't get your heart broken. Don't put too much faith in your generals. They have no idea what they're doing in almost all cases. And for the most part, I'm not going to be, sniping at anyone in particular. I'm not trying to throw shade. Sometimes there are specific instances, but a lot of it is just a general trend. But I just have to let you know that ahead of time, because people get so excited and so caught up in the hype of all of these things that they will be personally offended if you poke holes in it, because they have allowed themselves to become so emotionally invested into these things, and they need them to be real. They need them to be successful to make themselves feel perhaps.
I'm guessing he's just priming them for him to be like, it doesn't matter if you don't like Target. Who the fuck cares? Which is true. Everett GA with 21 months says, thanks for everything, and ugh, that intro. Benegami says you're right, he does get it. Quick, he's becoming self-aware. Panic, everyone, panic, the end is nigh. He's not that self-aware.
Less anxious about the state of the world and their country and their culture. So I'll just point this out quickly. If conservatives actually understood what culture is, which is probably a prerequisite to being able to take a culture back or produce it effectively, right? If they actually understood it, then they would have far different understandings of what it means to be an American, what our immigration policy should be, etc. Because right now, conservatives seem to basically think that everything will be okay, that you can sustain a nation based on people having the correct opinion on a calendar, on a syrup bottle, on Mr. Potato Head, a sports team, etc. And a lot of people think that we shouldn't even address these things at all. They're just trivialties. But I disagree. I think they are actually important. The problem is that the discussion around them doesn't seem to understand what the problem actually is, which is that American culture, American identity, all of this has been completely deconstructed, and it's just up for grabs right now. Like, if this weren't the case...
I mean, certainly in, the postmodern era and then like the post 9/11 era, there has been a lot of discussion about the deconstruction of the narratives that we have had traditionally throughout the 20th century about what America is. Correct? But that's just a thing that happens in culture. Culture constantly changes and self-examines. There are periods of self-examination which are followed by periods of change, periods of reformation. That's fine. And I assume that's basically what he's going to be saying here. I don't think I'm necessarily disagreeing. I assume we're both just on opposite ends of what we hope it recrystallizes into. I would hope that we continue to develop as a society and culture where we recognize the naive beliefs, perhaps, of our old cultural view of ourselves, and it's able to crystallize into a clearer, truer version of ourselves that can see strength in diversity. And I'm sure that's something John would laugh at, like, haha, stupid, like, I don't know, progressive slogan vacuous. No, I think there's genuinely a strength in different perspectives and people coming from different places and having different ideas. I think that's great. It just seems like a lot of people, for whatever reason, feel that if we are a country of many different viewpoints, that is inherently destructive, which John believes. I don't. I think that you can have a cohesive culture that works together with the understanding that everyone within that culture is exactly the same. That's fine.
I can pretty much guarantee you that our culture would...
Found the GTA 4 parody, John Doyle? Oh, God.
The #1 conservative talk show.
I'm not going to sit through a whole GTA radio thing.
look much more like something approximating a right-wing Christian conservative culture than it does now.
Yeah, he said triviality is weird.
So I just have to start off by pointing that out because it comes as no surprise to me that the same class of people who thinks that anybody can be an American so long as they do so legally and write down that they want to work hard on a piece of paper, that's also the class of people that says that culture is something that can just be commissioned. We can just take the culture back by making better culture. But as we'll discuss, our culture is sick because our people are sick. But okay, what's the problem? When we say we're losing the culture, what does that mean? Our problem is that our culture...
It's not racist enough is going to be his answer, pretty much, is my guess.
...is backwards and masochistic. It hates itself to the extent that it even exists beyond being an anti-culture, where our culture is that we have no culture. It wants to be humiliated and embarrassed and stupid. It's like we said years ago. American cultural exports are essentially gluttony, feminism, and butt stuff. Like, that's what we shove into the face.
Oh! Gluttony can be fun. Feminism's good. Butt stuff also good. Okay. Does John think that America invented butt stuff? Because, oh boy, John, there was a long and storied history of butt stuff. Just saying.
Faces of the rest of the world and say, look at what we do. Like, this is what is conveyed by the flag of our empire. And
is it? Like, if you want to look at, like, positives, if you were to, like, genuinely try and be optimistic about what America stands for, I would hope, if you were going to put it in these terms, that would be something along the lines of what I talked about. You could articulate it better, but something along the lines of being able to live and work together in a diverse environment where people are free to express and be themselves, as long as they're not hurting other people. Like, that's a positive when that works. That's great. That's good. It becomes a problem when people are shitty or racist or xenophobic or homophobic. I don't understand how tolerance is a bad thing.
And these are the more extreme examples. These are the things that really wake people up to how badly we've lost, and we'll discuss the more subtle aspects of this stuff in a minute. But
I am here for John Doyle's Doomer arc, though. I am pretty happy about that.
The really degenerate...
If he wants to be a Doomer, I am here to watch it happen. Meek says, what is he talking about? America has huge cultural exports. It's why people on the other side of the world know what Mickey Mouse or Marvel movies are. He thinks that America should be culturally exporting things like segregation and white supremacy. I think that's what he's upset about. Or he just wants to be isolationist and have those things be something that serve him in a very personal way.
Content The problem is it's tough to compete with that, which doesn't mean that it's good, just that man's nature is not good. So if your strategy is just to make better content that's more attractive to people, that they're going to prefer, how are you going to do that? If this person is making music that makes people feel powerful because it's talking about violence and sex, and there's a million of them just like that, the instrumentation itself has been produced by a computer.
That's John Doyle's view of music, by the way, is it's just violence and sex. It's a very intricate view of the modern music scene, John. Ashley says, is there even a slight possibility he could let down his redemption arc because of this? Or he could be led down his redemption arc. There's no redemption. I'm not gonna, like, completely preclude that. Like, it's great to imagine anyone is capable of coming back from the edge of being just, like, the worst person, but practically speaking, John is in this. John is not stepping back from this ledge. I fully don't believe it. Like, no. I think this is just who he is forever.
That has it down literally to a science to entrance people, to hypnotize them, and you make one song about wasting tax dollars. You understand there's sort of an imbalance there. And two, with a lot of what has become our culture, we're at a point now where the attitudes of the consumer are too rotten to be rehabilitated organically. Like, they will no longer respond to that treatment, because when people are offering perversion and evil, that's the forbidden fruit. That's always going to be eye-catching. It's always going to be enticing to people, and you can't act...
John, but, like, being gay is normalized for the most part. So how is that even forbidden fruit? Some people are just gay or bi or pan or whatever. It's fine.
Actually expect people to reasonably refuse that consumption and indulgence, especially at a large scale. Like, some people might refuse it, good for them. But most people will not do that because our nature is imperfect and it's flawed. So the way that our system is now, it's very easy to profit off selling and promoting vice, degeneracy, hedonism, everything like that. And even ignoring all the other factors which do play into this, I'm not optimistic about outcompeting that kind of content to prevent society from killing itself. This
So much for the marketplace of ideas, am I right?
kind of degeneracy has been going on at varying scales and to varying extents for thousands of years. And the only thing that actually works...
Not much of a degeneration if it can degenerate for thousands of years, and yet we're doing better than ever by most metrics, John. Funny says, John being able to laugh at yourself is good. It's not an obsession with humiliation. One of the many reasons no one liked Joffrey Lannister is that he was a humorless douche who couldn't take a joke. Part of a healthy culture is the presence of self-awareness and self-mockery. The beginning of mass cultural delusion is when you lose those things. I think John is the kind of person who is incapable of self-reflection at that level because for himself it would be devastating.
And shutting it down, this kind of content is like literally shutting it down. I mean, this has been done before. We can do it perfectly well here. There is no constitutional, legal, moral, nor historical case for people being able to profit off the moral degradation of Americans. And this has to be the path forward, by the way, with the particularly rotten and wicked stuff, because the effort to just make better culture puts too much faith into, one, the ability of people to be rational consumers at a large scale, and two, and perhaps more importantly, our ability to even understand what better culture is, let alone to produce it at a scale which could actually compete for the majority. And also, it assumes that any real threat to the economic and cultural hegemony of the regime would not just be crushed instantly, which it would be. They don't really care if you want to fleece money from conservatives by selling them like a based beer or something like that, but anything that's actually serious, yeah, they would crack down on that swiftly and harshly. It would disappear overnight. And we've been saying this for years, which is that we have to cut off the ability of evil to influence people from the top down. If it occurs to people at their own volition...
Isn't it weird that all his plans look so similar to just, like, brutal authoritarianism from the top down? What a coincidence.
You know, I think I want to go organically pursue vice. There's only so much you can do for them, pray for them. But the way that our culture is now, it is
Pray
filled
for
with...
them, put in an autocratic leadership that forces everyone to behave in ways that make you comfortable at the expense of everyone else.
Incessant distractions and temptations to where even people who really put serious effort in to avoid stumbling, even they're compelled to indulge in this type of material and self-loathing and masochism. And that's a violation of their sovereignty, actually. Being assaulted by this constant, unrelenting promotion of vice and smut and degeneracy.
Freedom is slavery.
That is a violation
War
of individual autonomy, and that can't be tolerated. And I have a lot of respect for artists and storytellers. I'm not one of these people who thinks that anybody can do anything that they put their mind to. I do believe in talent and innate ability, but I also believe in the government protecting its people from being harmed, especially for profit and at a mass scale. And our problem gets dressed up in a million different ways to take our attention and our dollars in a million different directions, but it's ultimately the same thing that it's been for decades. We do not have legitimate representation. We do not have legitimate political power, which is to say that our power, our ability to make the world closer to how we would like it to be, to how it was for our parents and for our grandparents, that does not exist in a legitimate capacity. That's a serious conversation that requires a lot of brain power and discipline and coordination to solve.
John, the material conditions of our, like, parents and grandparents are not the same as they are for us. That doesn't mean that there aren't better outcomes that we should be striving for. That doesn't mean that there aren't problems with representation. I'd agree. This is one of the only things I think John and I actually agree on is, and this is an age thing, luckily, I think younger people recognize this more readily, regardless of their place on the political spectrum, but a huge problem is the wealthy. The wealthy are incredibly out of touch. Whether we're talking about wealthy Democrats or wealthy Republicans or whatever, they're out of touch and they don't listen to actual people. John and I both recognize this. The problem is John wants to come in and replace this system with an authoritarian right-wing dictatorship in which him and people like him get to dictate life for everyone else, whereas you or I's solution would be, hey, maybe we should do something about all this income inequality. Oh... Magpie says, people who use the word degenerate, I usually say don't need to listen to them. How long before we found out John has been, Degenerate is a thing that Nazis use all the time. I hate the trope. I hate the trope that someone who is homophobic is secretly gay. I understand why that's a trope, but when that is the first thing everyone says when someone's being homophobic, it treats the problem as though homophobia is a problem coming from gay people that are just in the closet. Nope. Straight people are the primary reason for homophobia, not gay people. Aaliyah with 100 bits says, I really wish John was a boomer and he aspires to... Wait. I wish John really was the boomer he aspired just so he could get got drafted. I'm sure he's from a wealthy suburb of Detroit. He would have gotten bone spurs.
But it's a lot easier and it's a lot more fun, a lot more profitable to circumvent that discussion into silly things that get a lot of attention on social media. And if we had that power, that doesn't just mean that all of a sudden everyone who's making culture are just going to be our guys. The people who are good at telling stories would continue to be good at telling stories without them having to be ornamented by woke stuff or perhaps having them be subversive by nature. The same goes for all culture.
Hello, Cowboy
which is to say
Skeleton.
that the same way that now there are people who are right-wing who make great, successful movies, their path of least resistance into becoming successful in entertainment or whatever, how they pass the loyalty tests for admission is by keeping that to themselves, not setting off any alarms and transgressing against the religious beliefs of the regime. Same goes. When we take the culture back, what that looks like is the same, except now in order to achieve success, you can't be caught dead expressing sentiment or having sympathies to anything that goes against what we want our culture to look like. Doesn't mean that all of a sudden our guys are in charge of making all the culture, but it does mean that we have enough power to direct what that will look like and to a certain extent who those people will be. But again, the guys who...
I don't think that will work the way that you want to, John. Again, the problem is you were assuming that you can, like, naturally put into place incentive sets that just set that way, like our situation currently that incentivizes at least milquetoast progressive views and cultural products that are sold by companies like Disney. You think you can do the negative of that and incentivize the opposite. It's not gonna work, John. It isn't. Because people just aren't that big of a piece of shit. Like, that's miserable. You cannot have a culture whose primary exports and primary concerns are that of just hating people. Do you know how fucking, like, rotting from the core that is? Not sustainable. Not good.
we have who are closest to the levers of power are completely incompetent. So we can't really soon expect anything to change under these circumstances. You know, I remember doing some event last fall. Go back to my hotel room, hanging up the suit. I throw on Fox News in the background. Ted Cruz is on there. He's promoting his book about how to beat these people and take the culture back. And he was complaining that the woke Marxists were colluding with the Chinese Communist Party by editing out a Taiwanese flag in their version of Top Gun, but also that the Chinese version of Bohemian Rhapsody omitted the fact that Freddie Mercury was gay, and he said, we have to fight this. Dude, what are you talking about? Who was...
I mean, first of all, Freddie Mercury was bisexual. Second of all, that movie was trash anyway, so... The Trey says, this is what I find fascinating about John. He's a perfectly standard fascist with nothing new to say, but he has a fundamental hatred for other ideologies that he sees the cracks in the nature of reactionary politics. He isn't special or unique. He isn't some secret thought leader. He's just a hateful little worm that's incapable of self-criticism.
This for? We have to fight China because they deny the existence of a country which no American can find on a map, and because they refuse to, like, what, validate Freddie Mercury as a queer icon? This is your far-right, conservative, pro-American senator from Texas? God help us. The point being, we can discuss the logistics of this at a later time, what it would look like, but until this thinking shifts from where it is now into something with more teeth, don't expect anything to change. And yeah, if you want to get into more detail with that at a later time, let me know. We can do a whole discussion on what that would look like as a matter of policy, personnel, etc. Also, why do you take so much time to do those news hits, to sell those books? Like, do you have that time? Everything else is under control. We can throw it on autopilot. Okay, let's talk about the culture. Because the right has no real cultural presence, as it has no real political presence, because we have no political figures. I mean, guys that are actually big players, guys that represent us.
Elon's a right-wing weirdo, the richest guy on Earth, and pretty prevalent in pop culture.
At least until next year.
Kanye, Trump.
We also have no real cultural figures, so instead we have this weird hybrid where our biggest thought leaders make themselves into these quasi-celebrities who create grand spectacles for themselves to denigrate things like the Barbie movie or whatever is the outrage of the day, but simultaneously to police the speech and behavior of anybody who wants to do anything real. So we've got this weird hybrid of a political, cultural class, which really retains the benefits of neither of those things. So they're not powerful enough to really achieve things for us politically, but they're also not really powerful enough for us culturally to get any wins there either. So it's like, who's this really for? You know, it's trying too hard. It's like we've been saying, culture isn't something that you can just force or commission. Culture is something that people do. It's defined by what people do, and conservatives don't do anything. We have no self-understanding, no regard for an intellectual...
What are you even trying to save then, John? Like, what are you here for? Like, what vacuous imaginary thing are you even identifying with?
Tradition. And so when we try to make something that is an example of right-wing art or right-wing culture, typically it does not go so well for us. But when the left tries to make something right-wing to mock it, it always ends up as everybody's favorite thing. Look at Rorschach. Look at Far Cry 5. Keep your rifle by your side. So we first need to understand what it means to even be right-wing, to be conservative, because without that, you're never going to make culture.
Rorschach smells like shit and piss.
Those things.
Like, I don't think you want to think Rorschach's cool, but okay. Ashley One-Up says, I can't wait for the right to completely implode and totally consume itself within its own darkness. Like Ungoliant, mother of all the great spiders? Well, that certainly sounds like something.
With your people because it has no mold to be cast from. We should also know what it means to even be a person or to be alive. You know, one thing I found in the last few years is that while the left may hate nature and seek to pervert it and corrupt it...
Wait, the left hates nature now?
The right...
How?
Is afraid of nature. They have a very naive view of it in a lot of cases, and a lot of that is almost like an overcorrection for what they correctly reject from what the left is promoting. And we're going to discuss this at length very soon. We're going to do a video about why social conservatives consistently fail despite being like pretty much always correct in their conclusions. But vitality is an important component of this that is largely ignored. But okay, culture, it's what people do, it's what they create. The problem is conservatives don't do anything. They don't create anything. You know, they don't even exist. They don't understand what is happening around them. They have
Trump
no idea what they...
77. He's 5 minutes away from a heart attack.
Would even want the future to look like. They can only say, well, not this. They can only define themselves by their opposition.
It's almost like they're an opposition party. Weird.
To the left. They can't stand for something. They can only express themselves and their desires in opposition to the left. They are chained to the framework of their enemy.
He's generally repetitive, but I feel like he's being more repetitive than even typical for John.
have no vision, they have no creativity, they have no will, no power, no viable alternative to wokeism except to just like cry about hypocrisy and continue fleecing money from their helpless but well-meaning base while they are being crushed by the consequences of the incumbent political order. It's like, hey, don't worry, things are fine. Just keep giving us money. Look at what we're doing. The left does something. Boom, look, South Park just owned the left. The pendulum shifts. People have had enough. Woke is dead, etc. Instead of like actually making something, making its own culture, making something real. Because to make a real counterculture, which is transgressive to the predominant one, that's pretty tough. That requires being called a lot of names, losing a lot of status that I don't think the incumbent hybrid class is really willing to sacrifice for the most part. And of course, I like to interpret pieces of
I feel like John really thinks that if he and other racists just stood up and like said what they wanted to say with a hard R on a daily basis, like they think there'd be some sort of like revolution and like all the secret right-wing Nazi shitbags would come out of the woodwork. Like, John, that moment was 2016 to 2020, and it's still kind of a thing now. It's already happened. You already have all the allies you're ever going to have about this really nonsense shit. There aren't a bunch of secret, like, neo-Nazis hanging around for you to recruit. This is the most popular your views will ever be. Please get over it. You're not gonna, like, foment some grassroots Nazi movement and get a bunch of Gen Z people watching Skibidi Toilet or whatever the fuck it is to come and march with you. Like, it's over. You had the highest moment of your YouTube career in like 2017. Been there. And that's fine. Just move on. Move on. I don't even know what you're doing here. Even when, like, if Trump wins, like, this year, then what? He's 1,000,000 years old. Who are you going to get to come after him and be some weird despot? It doesn't even make sense.
Existing media through a political lens, but I do that to normalize our ideas to hundreds of thousands of people in a way that is familiar to them. But I
remember that time I got his... Is he still not have a merch store? That'd be funny.
Do that to normalize.
Let's see. It's under maintenance. Womp womp. Cashel Gladio says it probably doesn't help that conservative counterculture usually boils down to, but like magic and stuff. I don't get what you mean.
Our ideas to hundreds of thousands of people in a way that is familiar to them, including the Giga Chad himself. Not because I'm trying to, convince people that we're making inroads in the culture. And so we try to co-opt things that happen and just claim them as ours. Like, Nicki Minaj against the vaccines? Based? Ricky Gervais made fun of snowflakes and SJWs at the award show ceremony. I think we're back. And so as it stands, the things that we try to co-opt...
For some reason, my favorite thing is when John Doyle shits on other right-wing people. I'm telling you, if John wasn't a piece of shit, he'd be up there with, like... He'd be a popular, like, bread tuber if he wasn't a Nazi, is all I'm saying. Like, he absolutely nails making fun of right-wingers when he does it. It's unfortunate that he is a piece of shit that's even worse. But his mocking is usually pretty fucking on the nose and nails it.
Perceived as victories by us simply by their virtue of not being woke. And that would be fine if it were because the right is understanding that at this point simply being normal is actually transgressive to the dysgenic, disgusting freaks that we're up against. But instead, it seems that people are just trying to sell false hope to their audiences. So right now, even the culture that's being made by us that's not explicitly right-wing or transgressive, that is a statement insofar as it's not woke. And if we had more institutional power, we could actually make things that are transgressive, which deconstruct and mock the gods of the regime, things that we mentioned earlier being equality, scientism, democracy, revolution, etc. And you do need that institutional backing.
Equality and science were on that goddamn list.
Because otherwise nobody's going to see it, which maybe is not important to you as an artist.
He's like an out-and-out Nazi. I'm not just calling him that for no reason.
But it is important to having cultural influence. And again, I have a lot of respect for artists, for storytellers. I'm not one of these people who thinks anyone can do whatever if they just put their mind to it, read enough books, work hard enough, study enough, whatever. I really do believe in talent. I believe in innate ability. And another big problem that we have is that people who tend to be conservative usually just invest their efforts into business, industry, keeping the trains running on time. Like, these are not people who seek revolution by nature. And so they don't tend to seek positions of power like this naturally. They think, wow, this is a pretty great system. I better get up and make some money. Whereas the left, they tend to be bitter and resentful by nature, and they seethe because they cannot compete. And people who are like that.
Wait, does the right not have institutional power, or do they go out and do they run the world and run the trains, and people on the left are losers and have no power, but you claim we have all the institutional power, but we're all losers who are unemployed? And you all run the world, but we're bitter losers, but you don't have institutional power. We do. I'm smelling a bit of a contradiction. Fenekagami says, moreover, that method is actively bleeding support. One of the most common reasons given for leaving the church is because of the people who stayed. Congregation size has shrunk from 137 to 66 over the last 25 years. Polling in Iowa shows 30% of Republican voters consider Trump unqualified to be president, if he's convicted. Cashel Gladio says, by magic and stuff, I mean that a lot of conservative values only make sense if you presuppose a lot of supernatural, assumptions about the nature of the universe, but that's a little too verbose. Gotcha. Do I think if someone did the hair dye in the shampoo bottle prank, he'd start screaming, freak in the mirror? I think he would relish the excuse to shave his head. Ashley One Up says, John, in 2045, this is the true death of our culture, people. President Hannah Blast just signed a bill to allow pure-blooded Earthlings to marry Martians from the off-world colonies. Lintz says, John, if you see talent and innate ability as sacrosanct, then why do you continue your failing channel? Clearly the world has decided you have no talent.
But who are more maybe aware of the situation politically, who are cognizant of what's going on, they usually end up getting involved in politics in some capacity, throwing their hat in the ring.
He cited him. He did it. He did it. And that's the picture he picked. Fuck yes.
Because they want to fight for a system and for a country that they love so much. And so that's why we have to understand the difference between the conservative artist and the artist who is conservative. You know, we don't want to put the cart before the horse here. We want excellence, we want art, and the problem is that by the nature of our current power structure, artists are going to have to play within the lines, certain lines that are set by these people in order to gain recognition, wealth, whatever it may be. And that's really the problem that needs solving. Like, we have to change those lines. We have to take control of them. We have to be the ones saying, you can't get canceled for making right-wing art, but you won't be able to make a living as a left-wing artist. We'll make you radioactive. No one will touch you. No one will want to work with you. And until that changes, any attempt for us to really...
But that would fall apart, John, because at the end of the day, we live in a capitalist system where art is usually made in a capacity at large scale for purchase, for people to buy, and people buy things they like, and people don't like right-wing messaging, so your product is going to fail. So even if you're claiming you could get some sort of institutional power and then dictate these things, you would lose that power by the very fact that other people are going to stop purchasing things from you. They're going to stop purveying your art because it suddenly sucks. Like, you can't get around the fact that people don't like the message you're selling. It's not a lack of availability, it's people don't like you and the things you believe. Lance says, ah yes, the famously safe and rule-abiding thing. Art.
Compete with this is just going to be us telling normal stories, but we're paying more for them because at least we know that the politics of the producers are more or less in alignment with ours, or making a sort of, you know, right-wing self-parody caricature because we don't understand ourselves. Introspectively, we can only define ourselves by our opposition to the absurdities of the left, whereas we could do that. We could make art that promotes our ideals, promotes what we want to be celebrated and elevated, not equality, but excellence, not scientism, but faith, not democracy, but leadership, not revolution, but civilization, and so on. And a lot of great movies do exactly this, and maybe you wouldn't even think twice about it because it's just normal. And if you start associating your artwork and your culture with things that people have already been conditioned into.
Magpie says, yes, that's why PureFlix is the top studio. Oh, wait.
To viewing as low status or whatever, you're setting yourself up for failure. It should simply be normal. It is what it is. It's not an anti-something else in branding or in purpose. It stands alone in favor of what it is saying. It believes in itself. It has the confidence to exist for its sake, by itself. And I'm not trying to take, the armchair approach of criticizing everyone trying to do something, people trying to do the right thing. I'm just saying, I think if we put as much effort into destroying these people's ability to artificially destroy and poison our culture.
Again, when his ideas are not on top, he describes it as artificial. Artificially, he assumes that there is a natural state that if we just stopped these perverts or whatever, everything would be fine and everyone would agree with me. That's wild. That's wild that he believes this. He genuinely thinks his opinions just naturally would be the majority if it wasn't for secret whatever leftists hiding at media companies. Hydrate. That's a fucking cope.
As we do into making culture, things would just sort of heal themselves and correct naturally to a pretty large extent. And I completely agree, these battles need to be fought. I'm just trying to direct the energy into something that's productive, even something like, preserving classic architecture, like Trump was doing in DC. Even that would be doing more in service of our culture than a lot of things that people are trying to do now. But honestly, even if we did get this down to a T, the truth is that we could spend a year making something really...
Does John think that wanting DC to have neoclassical architecture standards is somehow something the left would hate? That definitely feels like an opinion thing. Like, I'm fine with that. I'm cool with DC being neoclassical architecture and buildings having to follow that. So, is that some sort of really partisan belief? I don't see how it would be. It's very strange. Profane Priestess says, there are reasons artists tend to be progressive. Creativity requires, shocker, creativity. It requires a willingness to try new things, reflect on ideas, to think about what could be rather than what is. Fascism is in many ways a culture's drawn out suicide note. There's no glorious past to return to. You either move forward or you stagnate. You would lead us deeper into cultural decline, John. Fenekagami says, John, North Korea is literally doing what you're suggesting. The result? Do you know what the #1 in-demand product in North Korea is? South Korean cultural exports, because what you want does. Because what you want does, John, is kill culture so thoroughly it leaves people feeling empty. And Lance says we need to stop artificial control of culture by artificially controlling culture. Got it.
Cool and spend a bunch of money on it. But at the end of the day, there were probably 100 other things that were made that were more popular and that had a bigger effect on the culture. You're not going to create a parallel Hollywood. Other countries try to do this, not even with the anti-woke niche, and they don't even come close. They're just trying.
Are you talking about, like, other countries' film industries? Like Bollywood? It's a weird comparison. Other countries have film industries, yes. That doesn't mean they're just trying to copy Hollywood.
In general to compete, and it doesn't even hold a candle. The film industry, it's globalized. And just as American culture, which it exports and imposes into the rest of the world, is totally woke and reflective of American cultural hegemony, so will Hollywood until something serious changes. Same thing with outcompeting woke capitalism, starting a parallel economy. You're not going to create an anti-woke S&P 100. It's just not happening. You need to control the same forces which have forced these apolitical companies to become that way. And again, we're not being pessimistic, but to people who are overly excited and overly optimistic, a little dose of realism might seem that way. The message is simply that we have to understand the conditions we are working with. We shouldn't overthink what culture is, let alone good culture. So long as it's not deliberately subversive, degenerating, perverted, like it can probably...
Like, what is that? Like, that's so subjective. Degenerating. H. Baird says, I wish it was totally woke and only kind of woke, and that kind of sucks.
Pass the smell test, at least for the time being. But in terms of a long-term solution...
Like, I can't tell if he's being facetious and obtuse, or if he is genuinely so stupid that he doesn't understand that his particular subjective tastes are not objective, measurable rules of the universe that, like, everyone can agree to, or that most would agree to, or could be enforced in any reasonable way. Like, when he says these things, does he think everyone or even most people agree, like, yes, degenerate, perverted, these are all things that we can objectively measure the same? It's so unworkable and weird.
...to these problems, you really need to keep your eye on the prize. We need political power because the separation between the state and the economy, between the state and industry, that's one of the myths of liberalism. That's never really been the case throughout history, let alone with a global empire like ours. They're not separated. They
He
never
thinks that because he's the main character.
have been, and they never will be. I mean,
He
that'd be
doesn't have
great.
spiky enough anime hair.
That'd be awesome if that were the case. I agree. But this is nonetheless the reality of our situation. And so long as our regime is occupied by this sentiment, our economy and our media, it's going to be as well. The debunking of that myth, that's a separate conversation, one I suppose we will have to have at some point. The right will have to have too, if we actually want to be successful. But we are up against very powerful forces. And people say that, but they don't really believe it because they act in ways which contradict that reality, which is something that we're also going to discuss pretty soon with some talk about the Civil War and the collapse that we've been seeing. But the reality of our situation is that you're never going to independently create a challenge to their power because power by its nature destroys anything that threatens it, that actually poses a threat to the economic and cultural hegemony of the regime. It's going to be outright crushed or subverted, but it won't be allowed. And don't worry, there is going to be a time when that is no longer the case. I mean, these people are not competent enough to sustain their operation. But in the meantime, our efforts would be far better spent trying to accumulate and regain political power rather than just playing hot potato with people's money and telling them that it's doing something productive for them. And insofar as we are having these conversations, which is important, we should be having these conversations, but we need to direct a lot more of that focus to the elephant in the room, to what was written on the wall now almost 10 years ago, which is that Donald Trump's election and the energy surrounding that exists because he started a conversation about identity, about what it means to be an American, who we are.
John, you were like 16 when he got elected. Holy fucking shit. H-Bird says, I was in high school when I realized that not everyone thinks or experiences the world in the same way I do. I've noticed as I get older that a lot of people don't ever realize that. As a result, their ability to understand other people is very stunted, so they literally think large swaths of humanity are crazy and not that they just think differently.
are. And that was a conversation that Americans didn't even realize that they were starving to have because they'd just taken it for granted. They didn't know that it was on the menu. The reason that we've lost our culture is because we've lost our identity. If we don't know who we are, how can we justify continuing our civilization?
This is who we are, by the way. Vague platitudes about flags and George Washington. That's us. Just fetish objects. Look at that, folks. Denial of the lack. Have you seen it any clearer? We have a culture. Look at this fucking horse.
What civilization? What is that? What do you mean culture? What would that even be doing? What would that look like? I don't know. Thought this was just the natural state of the world. I took it as a given. But that's a conversation that hurts people's feelings. And it steps on toes because that's a conversation that draws lines. And I think that there's a very popular impulse that we see which seeks to redirect that effort into something less polarizing, like just finding out which idea led us here, because we like good ideas and we like bad ideas. And that's important to consider because we have to be careful with our desire to intellectualize everything. Because I'll give you an example. I watched the NWA movie recently, the one that came out in like 2015. It's so funny how obvious everything is. Like there's this montage of them on stage rapping about drugs and killing people. And then it cuts to a scene of people like burning their CDs and they're like on the bus, man, you speak a little truth, everybody loses their minds. Boom, cuts back, drugs, killing people, sex. Then they're at a press conference and they're like, art is a reflection of our reality. No, you idiot. No, these guys aren't making songs lamenting this behavior. Man, it sucks that my neighborhood dangerous. I guess I should have left the Democrat plantation. Like, it's all just glorifying it. It's music that is made to glorify and promote disgusting and uncivilized behavior, just like the Maury Povich.
Uncivilized behavior. John, you grew up wealthy. I don't really want to hear you talk about, like, communities of people who had to go without and the social ramifications of that. Because maybe you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. No matter where I am in life, at least I'm not John Doyle. We can all say that, unless John ever sees this, in which case he can't say that, which is... Sorry, John.
Show, Jerry Springer, you take behaviors and attitudes that were unheard of, that were reserved for the lowest classes of society, and you bring it into everybody's living room, and they can't help but watch because it's so bad. And you laugh at the people who protest your vulgarity and your efforts to subvert a polite and moral culture with this filth as if they're the problem. They're the ones demonstrating antisocial behavior. But it's not enough because people still eat this up. They want what's on the top shelf, the forbidden fruit, all this crap that's in our culture.
I feel like top shelf isn't forbidden fruit. I feel like you're mixing metaphors here. I feel like Jerry Springer's show is top shelf. Forbidden fruit is not working. Not working.
It's not a matter of, oh, we accepted X and that led to accepting Y. No, people in power decided that it was time for music with explicit language and murder and drugs and sex. Oh, well, music is all
People in power decided. He really is. He's going for the, like, conspiratorial top-down view where he thinks there's a secret, like, group, commission, cabal, etc. Jesus.
always been about that. Not like this, actually. No, it hasn't always been like that. Maybe you listen to the lyrics of older songs, pick up on some innuendo in a lyric that's being sang, but at least I don't have to worry about my kids picking up on disgusting language because some ghetto whore has been told that she has a constitutional right to broadcast spoken word poetry about her literal asshole to the public. And this was fought in court.
You do have a constitutional right to that, I would bet.
The battle goes on. Eventually, it's too late. People just accept it. They move on. We are obsessed with this intellect.
John, if you're worried about kids, I wouldn't. You would have to find someone who wants to be with you long term for that to be a concern. So you're probably fine.
Actual genealogy.
Of course it's racist. It's John Doyle. He's incredibly fucking racist. Like, that's his whole thing. Fenekagami says, John, the reason Trump was popular at first was A, loads of people are racist and sexist without realizing it, and B, people found it refreshing that a presidential candidate was upfront with who he is. Sick of forked tongues shit. Now a lot of people understand better how the world works, because Trump beat us over the head with it. I don't know about all that. He was a liar even then, but whatever. Tyler with a $5 super chat says, it's always bothered me that John is a fascist and displays fascist fighting tools in his background. I mean, this whole thing, you know?
This led to this, and then this led to this. Like it's some puzzle that we have to solve. It's people in positions of power making decisions, and us having insufficient power to stop that from happening. Not to say that's not important, studying these things, but like we said before, it's not really frog in the pan, where it happens slowly over time without you noticing.
Pot. Frog in a pot.
It's much more like frog in the blender. It just happens, and you have no way of stopping it, and then it's too late. You're like, I think I might be in a blender right now. Yep, darkness, it's over. But frog in the pan, that's a comforting lie because it implies an absolving of responsibility. How could we have stopped this? It was too subtle to notice. Really? These drastic societal changes, which were all thoroughly...
Again, John, you are like 20. What the fuck are you talking about? Drastic societal changes. Fucker, I'm older than you! What are you talking about? MH Darkbeast says, Viva Hannah Banana, how are you today? Do you want to play a game? Thoughts on the new box set? I hope the new Saw film that John Kramer not Doyle... Oh, God. I already have all of these movies. I'm not going to get this box set, but I'm glad it exists. They're making more anyway. Why get a box set right now when they're just making more? Ashley One Up says, I kind of get how boomers are nostalgic for a time they experienced long ago, but again, how can he be nostalgic for a time he never experienced? It's an imaginary hearkening to a time he imagines to be a golden age. It doesn't exist. It's a common fascist thing. There's always been people who imagine some sort of perfect past, and if we just returned to then, everything would be great. It's never been real. It's a fictional construct people have. Ferris Heck says, wasn't the Thong song a #1 when he was born? Yeah. He was born in like 2000. I don't want anybody else when I think about you. I touch myself. Like, there are tons of really raunchy, like, it's, come on, John.
Protest
99, sorry.
and argued against, that were just under the radar. The problem is, like now, most people don't care enough to work against what does not immediately affect them because they take their lives for granted. You know, they enjoy the day-to-day pleasantries and they would rather just continue that. And this is fine, that's normal, it's essentially unavoidable. But what does matter is that people who do notice these things stay focused and not be led astray by their respective distractions of the day, which for someone interested in politics might be 5 days spent discussing a calendar. Because at the end of the day, and you know this if you talk to people about things, nobody really supports these things. If they had a button in front of them that would just make them all go away in an instant, leaving everything else the same, they would hit that button. The problem is, and this is just the way people are, most people just do not care enough to actually put in the effort to oppose these things. So we might be black-pilled when we see, oh, you know, support for gay marriage at an all-time high. No, it's not. What that means is that—
What do you mean, no, it's not? I reject your reality and substitute it with my own. No further explanation either. Just, no, it's not. No, it's not. I'm John Doyle, and I said, no, it's not. That makes my feelings feel bad. So, no, it's not. I imagine life for John probably sucks a lot because he's like a Zoomer that's like this far right. And like a fifth of Zoomers are like gay or bi or pan, some kind of LGBTQIA+, right? So I gotta imagine he feels very alienated from his own age group. He's like extremely far right for all age groups, much less Zoomers. But he can't be this delusional, right? He can't really believe that, right?
most people have just surrendered because the battle—
Most people have just surrendered. The poll didn't ask if you've surrendered. It asked, do you support it? What?
has been lost.
Screaming at the radio, thanks for 32 months.
Most people aren't going to actively push back against—
Oh, I'm high on his copium right now. This is good. This is the best I felt about a John Doyle video in a while. His desperation is palpable. Like, this is the least I've worried about the 2024 election in a while, and it's because he's so, like, fucking lying to himself. It's amazing.
Something and risk having their lives ruined by the alphabet mafia, as it's referred—
The alphabet mafia.
to, simply for voicing an opinion that was considered normal until just a few years ago. And so they prefer to just—
That's a very normal thing, by the way. Remember that time I went on John Doyle's Discord and all his mods were called stormtroopers? Boy, a bunch of Nazis hanging out in a Discord server and calling other people the LGBT mafia while they jerk each other off over about how much better they are than trans people. That sounds like a cool place to hang out, and not a place where a bunch of I words spend their time. Cool, cool, cool.
the normie morality of, well, hey, I don't care what
Sorry, I only say that because I know they watch my videos sometimes and I think it's fucking hilarious.
anybody does, so long as it makes them happy and they leave me alone. So yeah, they support it, but they really just want to be left alone. And they mistakenly think that their best route to that is just surrendering the issue. And that really is one of our biggest problems. One of our biggest tasks is going to be getting people who are at their core productive, polite people who really just want to mind their own business to realize that they are the exception now. And if they want to leave a country behind to their children and to their grandchildren, they're going to have to become impolite and imposing and channel their productivity into cleansing the rot from our society. And that all means that they're
Cleansing the rot.
going to be called mean. That's the choice. You can have your country
Maybe
back.
he can commiserate with the PP people. Maybe. Maybe. Stromboli with 33 months says the real alphabet mafia. Oh god.
What could be easier?
A,
It's all alphabetical.
B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P.
You know, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Huh? That's all you have to do.
Now that's art. That's American culture right there.
Back, or you can avoid being called mean. There's no third path. And if you can get enough people to that point, then things will look a lot better for us. And support being properly understood as just surrender. That's very important to this. But we're going to need power to do that, specifically in institutions that work to curate the opinion of the public. Take back the universities. You want to know something about that? I don't think the woke colleges and universities are a problem.
Woke colleges.
To the degree that conservatives would have you believe. They're a problem. We have to take care of that. But a lot of what I hear about that is coming from people who haven't been to college in decades, and they see what's going on at the schools. They assume that there's a large causal link. They think they're just churning out these radical Marxists. Allow me to share some insight into what's really going on here. During my stint in higher education, I had to take one of those really woke...
His stint. Did he drop out? Welcome to the club, John. Fenekagami says, apathy over gay marriage is still a loser for you, John, because those apathetic people like you think you're a freak for being so weird about it. Honestly, people like you, Doyle, turn apathetic people into allies because they start seeing it as an important issue in need of support for bigots, from bigots like you, John.
Classes. It was mandatory. It was all about race and power imbalances and the oppression of the different groups by straight white men to varying degrees throughout America's history. It's exactly what you're imagining it as in your head. And I, being a black person expert, though at the time I wasn't yet accredited, passed the class with 100%. There was not a single point available to me in this class which I did not obtain. And the reason for that is that I understand what these people think about the world at a level of fluency where I can just answer all their questions perfectly off the top of my head. And the fun part for me wasn't, starting an argument, playing devil's advocate, maybe back in high school, but at this point I have nothing to prove. So what I derived a great sense of enjoyment.
I didn't have that in school either. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. Stone Corbell with a clip? What's this? Guys, are we the pronoun mafia now? Holy fuck. He just made us sound so much cooler than we are. God damn.
From was answering questions and writing essays, which if you're a liberal, you would think, oh, this is so great, this is so inclusive. But if you know me, then you're reading this and you're like, wait a minute, is he making a case for... So, just things like that. So that was a lot of fun. And everyone that I talked to throughout this, oh, it was just an easy class, which maybe, yeah, it was, but, we're not solving like differential equations or anything. So it's going to be comparatively easy. But I would show my assignments and my essays to friends and family. And there was a ton of material that would be included that they weren't familiar with or they hadn't heard of. And so I realized it just sort of worked out in my favor because, you drop me in like a mythology class. Okay, now I actually have to do the reading because I don't know a lot about mythology. So it just happened to work out for me because I've spent hours a day, every day for the past 10 years reading about this stuff. And so when it comes time to be evaluated like that, it's like, okay, this is the easiest thing ever. But I'll tell you this. So we had to do these group discussions where we'd say something and then we'd all respond to each other. And I went into this class, by the way, thinking like, okay, great. Another humiliation ritual. This is just going to be totally debasing, whatever. I'll get through it.
Humiliation ritual. Again, John, you being embarrassed isn't a humiliation ritual. You're just embarrassed.
But
like, it's not so... It implies it's some top-down, like, someone's intentionally doing this to me. No one is doing this to you. If you're embarrassed, no one is doing that to you. Not in the case you are giving. You're embarrassed of your own opinions. If you're embarrassed and humiliated, it's not a ritual. You're just shit.
What I actually saw was very white pilling. You had your typical woke MLK wannabe preacher types who were legitimately illiterate. Like I would read the things that they would write. I could understand what they were saying, but it was not well written at all. It also wasn't what you would typically expect like bad writing to look like. Like it was presented very pretentiously, like it made an attempt at punctuation and structure. The best way I can describe it is if you took a rock that you found on the ground and you just polished it really hard to try to make it look cool. That was like the quality of writing from these people. But you had, of course...
I wonder if they got degrees, John, because you apparently didn't. So, interesting you're spending so much time trying to feel better than other people.
Those kinds of kids, and then a handful of like white liberal types. The average kid though in the class totally disengaged from the material. The average white kid was like, well, I don't understand why people say reverse racism isn't real, and I don't like being stereotyped as dumb just because I'm blonde. And I'm like, wait a minute, the sun is coming out? These kids weren't buying it at all. We'd submit our final projects. They had to be a creative expression of what we had learned in the class. It was worth 500 points. The biggest assignment of the semester, and this one girl wrote the stupidest poem of all time. It was like 30 words. That was her final project, 500 points. And it's not even that she's like a bad poet necessarily or whatever. She obviously just
She went to college in Texas. I don't know which one.
Care about any of it. And then I'm reading the peer feedback, and it's guys like, wow, Zoe, I could tell you put a lot of effort into this. This is so impactful. And I'm like, dude, no freaking way. Are we back right now? Do I CC somebody on this? Do I forward this to the We're Back department? These kids just don't care. Nobody took it seriously. And so then I'm thinking,
Bumble Homestead says this boy is only a few years older than my child. We do not exactly live in a bastion of progressive ideals, and his talking points are so far from my kids' peers. Oh yeah, John's an outlier. It's one of the reasons he's interesting.
I'm like, okay, what is causing this then? What is the problem? I thought about it. Have you spoken to the average college student, let alone one who has to take classes like this? They're not retaining the information. The average IQ of a college student has been dropping. It's been dropping for a while, and resultantly, curriculums are getting dumbed down. They're getting more woke. But why is this happening? Are the woke colleges and universities really to blame? Sure, to some extent, but there's something else that we ignore, and this is something that we're
I don't know about John's parents specifically. I know they're all so right-wing, but I don't know pretty much anything about him personally.
One of those videos that I mentioned earlier, about the American identity, sovereignty that I mentioned in the last video, a lot of what people regard to be the woke young generation, it's really easy to view it through that lens. It's not so uncomfortable, but a lot of that woke young generation can be explained by the fact that Gen Z, Gen Alpha, these are majority minority generations of teenagers, students.
Majority minority, one of the funniest.
Most of them are non-white. And if being woke is defined in practice by, supporting efforts which seek to subvert a nation that was established as an Anglo-Saxon country and culture with traditions and customs and values, which date back literally thousands of years, should it really be so surprising that as the youngest generation becomes further removed from Northwestern Europe, that the country that...
Yep, he's just going there. He's just going there. He's literally doing the thing
that they want to live in and will work towards living in looks very little like Northwestern Europe? Or on that note, when you bring in millions of people from non-Western countries...
Hold on one second. Let's test some institutional power. The algorithm.
Countries into Northwestern Europe, that it stops looking and functioning and feeling like Northwestern Europe? Is that surprising? You look at the data, you find out that 4 in 10 Gen Zers say the founding fathers are better described as villains. What the heck? The woke kids, damn it. Okay, maybe, but you look at the data on this, and what you see is a single-digit percentage of white people will describe the founding fathers as villains, 9%. Even college-educated white women, 6%. Oh, but everything is the fault of liberal white women. Cringe, grow up. Yeah, really edgy. Whoa, you insulted liberal white women. You better not let George Soros and Klaus Schwab find out.
I tend to ignore the stats he brings up, by the way, mostly because, like in the last video, every time I checked them, they were from a right-wing think tank that literally exists to put out bullshit, bad studies to try and back up right-wing talking points. So it's just not really worth it when he's literally in bad faith giving bullshit sources, so...
about that, or else the freaking CIA might assassinate you kill style. You got to understand, we know what's going on with the woman stuff. We get it. We discussed it at length in the last video. But it's just like denigrating Italians, French, Canadians. It's, you can be edgy as much as you want, as long as the target is ultimately white. That's how the game is played. But anyways, 6% of college-educated white women describe the founding fathers as villains. Meanwhile, about 40% of black people, over a quarter of Hispanics, about a third generally of all non-whites describe the founding fathers that way. And this is even despite the fact that those demographics are far less likely to attend the woke indoctrination camps. Wow, crazy that the woke education
indoctrination camps
to be the most effective in populations which have an incentive to believe it already, or perhaps even a grudge against the targets of it based on envy, what their parents told them, something else. Crazy. And people struggle with this because white people mostly interact with other white people, especially about politics. And when they do talk to non-white people about politics, a lot of times it'll be at work or something, and there's like a shared moment between guys laughing at a gay person or at a sexist joke or something.
John's view of the world is certainly something. As you do at work, like this Getty Images stock photo.
Maybe you get your hair cut at a black barbershop and you're like, wow, we're not so divided after all. But you remove a lot of the more absurd stuff from the conversation, start talking to people about how they actually want society to be structured, where the money goes, where the people go. You'll find that things become very different very quickly, especially when you're not in a setting like that. You know, you're just in your community and the other guy is in his community. So yeah, it's not surprising that as generations get younger, we see that they are consistently more likely to identify the founding fathers as villains, say America's an unfair society, that significant changes are needed, various policies moving around, a number
You think that significant changes are needed. You would just disagree about what the changes are.
changing here,
It's
number
weird that he's criticizing people criticizing America when that's like his whole thing too.
changing there. That's not that significant. That's how the government works. When they say significant changes, that means things like defunding the police. That means radical, woke stuff that we're seeing now. That's what they're talking about. They don't just mean like increasing entitlements by 2%, something like that. Okay, so what's the real issue here? Look at my case, for example. You could never convince me to be ashamed of my heritage. I don't have that impulse in me. I took
Okay.
it upon myself to go the distance, do all the reading, just out of my own curiosity. When I was in school, you know, I said what I had to say to get A's, but at the same time, I never lied. Now I have that sense of pride. I also know the information to justify it. But the information was second. What came first was a fire in my belly, that spirit. I felt a sense of pride in my identity. You could never
It was the spirit of Columbia that came unto him that day.
indoctrinate somebody like me. And you really can't indoctrinate someone like me, but who just never cared enough to do all the reading for himself. So he doesn't have all the real information necessarily. But at the same time, he's not buying any.
John's like a big brain boy. You can't brainwash him, okay? You can't brainwash John. He knows that America is the bestest ever and has never done anything bad, and the past is always great and better, and racism is totes cool. John would never be brainwashed.
To what they're teaching them in school. Because people who have a pride in their identity and in their heritage would never agree to its deconstruction or the deconstruction of the civilization that descends from that, which is what woke seeks to do. So the problem isn't really the information, it's that Americans are demoralized, and we're demoralized because we know that we're an occupied nation. We haven't had our interests
Occupied. Do you know what that word means, John? People around you being people you disagree with isn't an occupation. You're just sad. That's not what those words mean. Do you need like a dictionary that specifically tells you what different emotions are? So you can learn a vocabulary for your feelings? I get that.
put first in decades. We're embarrassed on the global stage. We're sold out. It's humiliating. Let alone everything that we see in the media, in advertisements, etc. And we've seen data too that teaching white kids that they're evil, that lowers their self-esteem. And if you don't have
That's not a thing people do. That's literally not a thing anyone does, psycho.
self-esteem, how can you believe in your own existence? How can you justify its continuation or the continuation of your culture or your country or your ways of life? It's not that they've been taught compelling information which wins the argument to a careful mind. It's that they've demoralized generations of people who are now just limping along, waiting to be put out of their misery. These kids are already depressed. They're mentally ill. They're spiritually ill. They are sick from chemicals and endocrine disruptors. They're fat. They just want to die. They literally just want to die. In the universities, they hand them the tools to articulate why maybe that's not such a bad thing. And then that's why they start crying.
John, have you considered that younger people struggle because their material conditions are worse and it's not because of some bullshit right-wing conspiracy theory that you're parroting here? Like maybe they're upset because people in power don't care about us, our financial situations, our futures, the environment, like those things. Just a thought.
You talk to these kids long enough about these issues, they start
Fenekagami says, John Doyle, you can't indoctrinate me. I'm already indoctrinated into the cult of nationalism. That means I can't be manipulated. I'm the manipulator.
crying. They identify with the struggles of the lower classes of people because they themselves are struggling. They identify with narratives of victimization because they
Oh my god, can you imagine? Sympathizing with people who struggle, the horror! We've been manipulated into sympathizing with people who need help.
themselves are depressed. People's attitudes towards the world, towards politics, they are far more informed by what they see in the media, on social media, how all of this makes them feel, than by what they're learning in schools. Notice how you've never once met a well-adjusted white liberal. They don't exist, especially the younger ones. All the well-adjusted white kids are like center-right, but they'll say they're apolitical because they don't feel like getting nagged. The reason kids become liberal is because of resentment. They resent the world around them. They resent themselves. It's all driven by resentment, obviously. All change is going to be...
John, the projection here, I'm going to be honest, did you get permission from IMAX? Because I think you're maybe breaching some trademarks here. This is some high-quality projection. You think people on the left, which I know he's saying liberal, he means everyone on the left, that's how he describes them, are basing their personalities and political beliefs on, like, self-hatred and anger? Have you met you or watched any of your videos for the past 5 years?
Linked to resentment, since you kind of have to at least resent something a little bit if you want to work towards changing it, right?
Hydrate.
Now, imagine the amount of resentment you'd have to store within yourself, within your being, to make your entire worldview about eternal, indefinite change and revolution, never satisfied. It's because these people are insatiable. They'll never be satisfied because the problem isn't with the world or with society, it's with them. That's why
John, recognizing current problems isn't a recognition or belief that there is never a solution or that there is no rest. What are you doing?
Instagram Reels are doing far more to get the youth in the right direction than just urging them to read, like, Thomas Paine or take a free class about the Constitution. These kids don't become this way because of their classes, so much as they do because of their social groups, because of the media, popular culture, etc. And yeah, education's important. K-12, probably even more important for things like this. But you could get rid of Marxist professors in every college or university in the country. And I guarantee
professors. What about Frankfurt School professors? Penakagami says, John looks at the TikToks of Gen Z people complaining about the bullshit they deal with in the workforce and laughs. He knows or understands nothing about his own generation. No.
Guarantee you, things would more or less stay the same, especially 5 years afterwards. There would be some change, but it would not be drastic. The information is not the driving factor here. You cannot demoralize a people with data points and history and facts and logic if they are proud of themselves. Maybe over time, but certainly not within a generation or two. Imagine trying to convince black people that they shouldn't be proud of themselves. Imagine trying to teach black people that they should be ashamed of their history. That would not work. They would
John, no one is doing that about white people. Literally recognizing historical wrongdoings isn't telling you to be ashamed of your identity. Holy fucking shit. Grow up.
Believe you, no matter what you told them. We don't have high schoolers on our side, reading the books that they're reading because they had a base teacher or something like that. We have them reading the books that they're reading because they saw a little Dark Age edit on TikTok or iFunny or something, right? They felt proud of themselves and they followed that impulse down the rabbit hole. What good is the information by itself? In order for people to believe good things about themselves, they have to believe that they themselves are good, that they excel, that they are capable of such good things. And Americans do believe that. Americans are patriotic, very patriotic by nature. And Americans want permission to be proud of themselves. They're starving for that permission. And if we're keeping score, there's a lot to be proud of, frankly. And whoever gives them that permission to be proud of themselves is going to win. The left gives them permission to be proud of their contribution to social justice or whatever, handing away the torch of their civilization. We are too scared to give them permission to be proud of rejecting that, rejecting the idea that there was anything wrong structurally and fundamentally with our society at any point. It's like we said years ago.
At any point. Jesus fuck. Yet Doyle doesn't care about the good. He cheerleads for authoritarians like Trump and Putin. Well, to him, that is good. That's what he considers good.
Don't tread on me versus silence is violence. People like strength. People gravitate towards strength. Don't tread on me says
authoritarian personalities do.
I want to be left alone, so leave me alone. And if you don't, maybe something will happen. I don't know. Whereas silence is violence says you literally have to participate enthusiastically in our cause or else you are morally transgressive. That sounds like confident messaging. That sounds like something that takes itself seriously. Doesn't care about being smug or getting one over on the annoying coworker or the extended relative. It takes itself seriously. That's why it wins. The anti-white stuff, the anti-Western stuff, those are the tools that they have been given by society to articulate the more subconscious messaging that people feel, which is that we suck. It's not a coincidence that you cannot find a single straight white male in advertising. It's not for you.
What in the world? You don't think you can find a single straight white male in advertising? I don't see advertisements because I'm not a psycho and I know how to avoid them. But if I did, I'm guessing I could find a straight white Tea with Goblin says, what if I told you that you can find things in your own heritage and history to like and connect with, while also acknowledging that as white people, our ancestors did dreadful things. It doesn't have to be one thing or the other. Nuance is the death of extremism. Fenekagami says, yes, you can, John. Reality banging on MAGA people's echo chambers is heavily demoralizing them. Many of them are giving up. Outside of them not voting, I can't describe the ways they're giving up without causing Hannah 2OS problems. Oof.
The last classically masculine pop culture icon, James Bond, kill him off, talking about replacing him with a black guy. There's an impulse.
They replace James Bond's actor all the time. That would be James Bond still. One sec. Alright, I'm back.
Of envy, an erasure of
Overthought says, I would like to see Folgers get away with an incest commercial with a family that wasn't white.
white culture while simultaneously claiming that there's no such thing as white culture. But a big component, too, is removing the ability of white people to see themselves portrayed positively in any way that is separate from being subservient to a woke narrative or agenda. Captain America, he's good because he fights for gay rights. Bigot, but by themselves, independently from helping the poor, oppressed people, which means paying for...
John, gay people are mentioned once in the context of Captain America in the movies that I can remember, and it's nothing other than he's in a scene with a gay guy. That's it. What are you talking about?
For them to do literally whatever they want. I mean, that's how an AI would...
John, I don't know if you know this, but good people aren't good people because of their identity. They're good or bad because of their actions, and even then it's a mixed bag. So yes, being homophobic is bad and is a bad thing. Being an ally is good and is perceived as a good thing, and it's a quality good people have. Correct? It's not a trick, that's just how life works. Meek says, Captain America has been woke for decades. Oh yeah, he has no idea anything about Captain America. Genuinely.
Interpret this whole system. White people aren't cool, they're cringe, they're...
Cashel Gladio says, I'd argue that if I was learning about the real history of your country doesn't leave you feeling a little dejected, in some capacity, you probably aren't learning the real history of your country. I think that's pretty universal, not just an American thing. History is messy and full of messed up shit.
Dorky, they're bland, their music is lame, blah, blah, blah. And then we're like, oh, okay, because, you know, we're afraid to speak about ourselves positively. Because if we really started keeping score, that would make people uncomfortable. You know, it's not just about the information. That's important, but who is learning that information? How do they feel about themselves? Through what lens are they going to be interpreting that information? Who's it intended for? What's the purpose of it? These are the real questions. We're going to have to answer those. But I do want to go through still our year in review. 2023, the year we made culture, the year we fought woke. All right, remember this guy? Remember Oliver Anthony? People went insane for this guy. Literally overnight, all the biggest talking heads were posting this guy. This is what making culture is. This is the way. And then it ended up not working out so well in the end. I swear to God, to this day, I have not heard the song beyond like 10-second clips. And I don't know if these people had just never heard a country song before, or maybe they're so used to listening to, you know, the hypnotizing rap music or pop music that when they hear what a real voice
Hypnotizing, holy shit.
and real performance with an instrument sounds like, they're just like, wow, we discovered fire. I don't know. Honestly, I couldn't bring myself to buy into the hype. And I remember deliberately not commenting on it at the time because it was one of those things, you know, everyone is so hot over this guy that if I say anything critical, I'm just going to get dogpiled. And that just, you know, was not worth it to me over something like this. Why are you being defeatist? We have to make culture. You're just jealous. This is what taking the culture back looks like. Look, this guy made a song, you know, let him make a song, let him cook. Stop trying to make it into this new conservative national anthem. Because that just brings it away from being culture. And maybe that's what...
You know, Fenn Kagami said they also cast a black girl to play Annabeth Chase in Percy Jackson show, inadvertently getting rid of the only straight white couple in the main cast of the entire Riordanverse. the authorize himself cast her because the important thing about Annabeth is her intelligence and wit, and the girl is perfect for the role. Only people like you, John, care about this change.
Ended up messing everything up. People expected way too much from this guy. But like we said, culture is an expression of the soul of the people, and the soul of conservatives is eternally smug. Oliver Anthony, he made a decent song, but more importantly, he gave people the hope that one day the libs may in fact could be owned. But you know, with most of these other examples, you know, you see conservatives, they try to make something, they try to make culture. It's a smug answer. It's made as a smug response to whatever the libs are doing. And because it's set up with that as the foundation, that's the lens through which it is viewed, conservatives aren't getting enjoyment out of it so much because of the product, but it's because of the satisfaction that they might actually be owning the libs upon consumption. That's what...
Yes, your entire identities are about contrarianism. I don't get it. It's frustrating.
They're getting out of the product. Its consumption makes them feel smug. The final battlefield for conservatives, Christmas dinner with their SJW family member. That's what their focus is on at all times. Now, in playing the long game, telling young people to become very powerful, that would probably do a lot more for us than just telling them to go into the trades. But while they're at it, buy the base version of this cringe product at a markup from a website, instead of just what you can go get at the corner store, because you have to punish some random company because this diversity hire in their marketing department, they ran a stupid ad campaign. It's like, hey, I'm all for voting with your dollar, but who's really benefiting from that? It's like, okay, I guess this is how we take the culture back. I'll buy your product. I'll wait for it to come in the mail 2 weeks later. I'll consume your product. Okay, all right. Now what? What happens now? No, that was my turn. I was selling you the product. I did you and the culture a service by selling you my based product. We are...
It is actually funny that you're recognizing sort of a true thing in that culture, and we have all been within our culture defined so heavily by being consumers that the only active agency we feel we have is either voting once every 2 or 4 years and buying things. We are inundated with this idea of, like, vote with your wallet, and one of the only things people feel that they can do is boycotts, but those at a national scale are pretty much never effective. Like, it's so interesting. Not wrong on that point. He is wrong, however, about the thing he gives a shit about, which is, you know, wanting to be racist. Fuck you. John Oliver Anthony hates people like you. He tripped into your talking points because, like most Americans, he's politically incoherent.
Are taking the culture back. You have to buy our version of the product, our version of this product. That's not a parallel economy. It's a satellite. That's an island. And yeah, you know, there are examples where this works and some where it doesn't. I'm not describing anything in particular. It's sort of a if the shoe fits kind of scenario. But in a lot of cases that we see, it's not a parallel economy. It's just fleecing money from your audience. And I know that because virtually 100% of your marketing is done to your built-in audience. If it were parallel, we wouldn't even know who started it. It would just exist. It wouldn't be linked to some figure. You would just see it. It's like Twitter. Look at Twitter. Everyone said, fine, we're going to go start our own social media platforms because Twitter's woke. Great, you isolated yourself. You removed yourself from the conversation. You went to an island. Now that Elon Musk bought Twitter, actually managing to single-handedly recapture an institution from the left, everyone's back on Twitter because they understand.
Are they? Not advertisers.
And that is the ideal for that type of apparatus. We need to be in the mainstream. We need to be representative. You're trying to make...
This video came out like 5 days ago.
Mainstream products to take out woke products. It's dishonest for their selling point to just be that they're anti-woke because I'm selling them, so they're anti-woke. It's like I'm only going to market them to you, to my audience. Like when I sell you Undertac underwear or iTarget training systems, I'm not telling you that that is going to take back the culture. I am telling you that it's going to make libtards get into car accidents because that's true. But it's because I need guys to stop wearing boxers that are seeping chemicals into their balls. And because I believe in marksmanship and, you know, in my experience, it's a lot easier to get a lot of the fundamentals down, just doing it at home without packing up, going to a range, whatever. These are good products. They provide a unique value. So it's not just, you know, buy this product because, well, the other product is woke. The other product is also cheaper. It's more convenient, but it's woke. So you have to give me your money because I'm not woke. It's like the same thing with the entertainment stuff. You know, it's the same problem that we have. Generally speaking, our enemies control the economic system and anything that actually poses a...
Who? He can't have it both ways. You can't say everyone on the left is some sort of like Nazi dog whistle piece of shit who sucks and doesn't do anything and is lazy, and also that you have no access to institutional power. You can't have it both ways. You can't.
threat to their consolidation of economic power, that's going to be crushed. And because of that, we would be far better off telling young people to go get law degrees than we are telling them to, hey, go to trade school. And then in the meantime, make sure that you're buying our based products. And again, not throwing shade, not sniping at anybody in particular. People do this in all circles. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not.
I bought the John Doyle advertiser underwear, and it chemicaled my balls and made me trans. That's why I have boobies now.
Times it's not. If you want to sell a product, great.
John Doyle's putting chemicals in the underwear, turning all the fascist trans.
Like it, even better. But it's unfair in most cases to tell them that when you sell them this product, it's making culture. It's taking down woke capitalism, because these people are typically smart enough to know that that's not actually the case. In most cases, these things shouldn't even be self-conscious about their politics, or rather their simple opposition to wokeness. Like, it shouldn't look like something that you would, stamp your campaign logo onto and hand out at a rally or something. Movies especially. I mean, conservative movies are made to be conservative movies, and leftist movies are made to be movies, but the people making them are libtards who just can't help themselves but to insert their messaging into everything. And if you're a filmmaker, if you're
movies with a message, gasp.
You will be gatekept from these positions and these kinds of opportunities if you're explicitly right-wing or outspokenly so, but you can still make movies that
like
are
famous leftist David Zaslav.
Right-wing by just making movies, which may be something to consider. Like, at this point, normal movies, which are excellent, might even be a bigger cultural victory for the right than a movie with very explicit conservative political messaging, which doesn't perform better than average. Just something to consider, but we can't just make our own culture. We have to attack these people and show them that we aren't going to tolerate what they're doing anymore. We have to use some form of power to hurt these people. Boom, boycotts. Okay, so this year I was told that conservatives took down Bud Light in Target. And I really don't want to be a killjoy, but the left has political prisoners right now, and our big victories are that we took down Bud Light in Target. I don't even think that's true, but if that were, see how that's kind of embarrassing for us to tout as victories, just very...
Benny Kagami says everyone is back on Twitter. John, even the right is starting to hate Elon's Twitter because 1, it sucks. 2, the libs and leftists are leaving Twitter, and right-wingers are trolls that need people to trigger to feel alive. Even right-wingers hate only having right-wingers to talk to. Can't be an opposition party if everyone on the place you're at already agrees with you.
Very easy victories to make us feel like we did something, like we actually have some kind of power. And I know that the left will publish articles saying that they're really scared of conservative boycotts and how it's influencing corporate America. The reason they do that, though, is because they need to pretend that corporate America isn't completely and totally on their side, and also so that they can continue the
corporate America's on the side of whoever's giving them money.
Of being these like perpetual revolutionaries against this incumbent evil Handmaid's Tale Christian conservative regime. Here's the thing, though. At the height of the backlash on social media, Target sales were down like 5% in Q2 last year. They went back up in Q3. I think they're going to be okay. The biggest takeaway, too, I guarantee you that the Pride stuff will be coming back in June at Target.
Do it. Gayer. Gayer.
So I wouldn't be so quick to declare that as a victory for us. Like, it's going to come back at Target, at every store. And even if it were a victory at Target, is that really what's going to make life better for us? One retailer simply not displaying Pride stuff? Well, it's about what it represents. It's about building momentum. Okay, yeah, where's the momentum then? Can we use it, please? Where's it headed? What's next? What are we doing? Taking down Bud Light? John, you're forgetting. We took down Bud Light. Okay, let's talk about that. Because I've been hearing Bud Light used as a verb, like as a concept. Oh, well, they need to get the Bud Light treatment. We need to Bud Light these guys. Is that possible? Can the Bud Light phenomenon be replicated? It's kind of a unique situation because it's one product, right? It's a light beer that already has a lot of competition, so maybe its place at the top was never all too stable. I don't know. I liked it well enough, but I never met someone who'd swear by it. Maybe all it took was just a little push. Again, I think we're getting too cocky. Getting people to switch to a light beer, even to the extent that it was done, isn't really comparable to getting them to like cancel a whole streaming service, for example, with hundreds of other programs which they may enjoy because of one or a handful of particularly woke programs, let alone pretty much any major company like Target or whatever. So if we're recalling the Bud Light phenomenon as a display of force, as a way to show these companies that they better not mess with us, I think that may be too optimistic. Again, the problem with being too optimistic is that it can leave your flanks open. It leaves you unprepared. Look at it this way. Netflix put out a movie like 4 years ago, which essentially depicted child strippers. Conservative media launched a full-out assault, and to this day, they bring that movie up. But still, Netflix has not changed its content trajectory in any meaningful way, yet any loss in market shares because of some other streaming service gaining with content that is pretty much equally woke. You know, I remember seeing headlines recently about woke Disney tanking. You look into it, they're losing revenue because they lost a license to stream some sport in India or something. And I was like, why are we pretending this is a victory? What are you even talking about? Why are you lying to people on our side about this? And
Disney's been doing worse in general, and I don't think the next 3 years are going to be great for them because I think that their content has stagnated and they're doing a really... I don't know what leadership is doing there, but yeah, it's not because of the woke, quote-unquote woke stuff that, like, the quartering bitches about. It's just they've been putting out worse movies.
Even woke movies that have failed, they sucked. There was no advertising. The only reason I heard about them was from our sphere. I'd heard about them because people were talking about how they were woke and failing because of that instead of they weren't advertised. And even then, there are plenty of movies that people watch which perhaps are less obviously woke, maybe in a way that just actually makes them more subversive, and they're doing fine. I'm not saying we shouldn't boycott, not saying we shouldn't punish these companies, just saying we have to be realistic with how we go about it. I don't think Bud Light should be turned into a verb because we managed to tank the sales of a beer which was being drunk by people who were probably annoyed with the trans stuff in the first place. Did we do it or did they commit suicide? There's a difference.
No,
honestly,
I don't think Disney's too big. Like being big can be a benefit, but it can also be a detriment. I think that the bigger the ship gets, the harder it is to course correct. So at some point, Disney might have to start shedding some of the IP they own in order to make up for some losses. They're still losing money on Disney Plus, I think. I don't know. But they have to make some sort of change. They can't continue doing what they're doing.
it was much more guys just having the opportunity to call other men, call each other gay, than it was some principled stand against progressivism. Like if you had a Bud Light in your hand, ha, you're gay. What? No, you're gay. Like that's the kind of rhetoric too. Ironically,
that's literally the outgrowth of all conservative politics, is that kind of bullshit. Is immature man children behaving like that.
These conservatives are terrified of in the first place because they don't want to be called mean by people who hate them. Again, it's an opportunity to be smug. You don't drink Bud Light, you get to be smug. That's the deal. They took Trump off the ballot in Colorado. We took Dylan Mulvaney off a beer can. Both sides are smug. I'd say it's neck and neck. Okay, well, they overturned the Trump ballot thing. So never mind. We're winning. We're up. Us status back. Culture status taken back. Please give me $30,000. Hey guys, if you like this video, leave it a thumbs up, leave it a comment, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so that you can get notified in the event that I post. That's why you missed the 2nd December upload. You weren't notified. You simply, it was a skill issue on your part, and then it was such a powerful and compelling video that big tech censored it, and so now you missed it. You'll never get to see it because you didn't have notifications turned on. And then also share the video with a friend. And then if you don't do these things, then you're... What are you, a Bud Light enjoyer? We're going to boycott you. I'm going to find out who you are. You think I don't have access to that information? You think that I don't have friends who have access to that information? You think I'm not so personally offended by it that I would dedicate a significant portion of my time to simply achieving that personal sense of justice? I would do those things, actually. Anyways, thank you so much for watching.
Crazy how he sees through a lot of this stuff and yet he has the most warped view on things. Yeah. He's certainly interesting.
God bless America.
Jesus Christ, John. So he's still sucks. Cool beans. Let's do a quick cleanse and then we'll call it a night. It's a little shorter than usual, but John Doyle's always hard to watch, so... what kind of cleanse? We haven't seen Sausage Guy in a bit.
Real interesting concept for today. We're going to use a rotisserie chicken to cook a filet mignon. There it is. And you may be saying, won't that ruin the chicken? Well, of course it's going to ruin the chicken, but we're here to see what it does to the steak.
I'm horrified.
If we can pass along that rotisserie flavor to the steak. Then it's a simple matter of just shoving the steak right inside of the chicken. It's like it was meant to be. When this reaches an internal temperature of 134 degrees, we're done. I got a little distracted watching DuckTales. We overshot the mark.
Duck steak, woo! It's chicken.
It looks beautiful. And it's a perfect
You said you wanted chicken fried steak, right? My Google wasn't working, but I think I approximated it.
Yeah. It 100% tastes like a rotisserie chicken with the texture of a steak. Actually kind of grossing me out. Yeah, it tastes exactly like a rotisserie chicken, which I now realize is not a quality you want in a steak. You want your steak to taste like a steak. This idea was flawed from the start. So
Don't cook meats and other meats. Don't cook my meats and other meats, please. I do not want. Do not want. Alright, so let's see who we're gonna rate on Twitch. Does anyone have, oh. Jesus Christ, that's a lot of subs. Does anyone have anyone they want me to, stream? Or raid, rather? Night, Mr. Blast, love you. I want a steak now, but like a good one. Someone says me, oh fuck it, sure. Jesus Christ. Day 25 of some kind of subathon? Okay. Have a good night, everyone. I'll see you soon! Until then, stay cool. Be nice to everyone. Unless they're John Doyle. John Doyle's a dick. Bye! I missed the button. That wasn't as cool as I was hoping. Even if I did it right, it wouldn't have been cool. That's a shame.